Good afternoon,
Good
sir.
afternoon. Good afternoon.
Welcome to today's section. So, first, I'm very excited to be having this session with you because I know
Why are you excited?
on your own, well, you wouldn't have wanted to be here, but I think your conversation is something I want other people to hear. I'm used to hearing it, and I also feel your ideas and your perspective about some of these topics we're talking about. Some people get to tap into your brain, and I'm excited that our viewers would have the opportunity to tap into your brain. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting. Interesting to know.
So I wanted to have this conversation with you because, like I mentioned in the introduction, your perspective of things and uh, this subject or this topic is something that um, new entrepreneurs or people who are new into the hiring process need to understand. You get, it's not just about the number of years you have in doing this, but the perspective or the approach you have in reviewing some of these things that make the difference. So welcome again. For the benefit of the viewers who may not know you personally, you could just give us a little bit intro about yourself before we get the ball rolling.
All right. So, brief intro. My name is Precious. Some people usually ask, why am I bearing a lady's name? My response usually is, maybe my mother wanted a lady. So as in I got a guy now, decided to have a blend of both worlds, right? So that's the reason for my name. Then I'm a man of multiple things. So, but the core of that is business. And I think that's what led us to this conversation about employer-employee relationship and the dynamics. So was setting up a business strategy consulting firm called Bistraction, registered as Bistraction Services International, but we are going by Bistraction Consulting. So we simply help entrepreneurs with strategy to be able to overcome business challenges and then to help them start, build, and grow sustainable business brands. I think that's as brief as we can get.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. So the very first thing, our topic for today is conducting engaging interviews, right? Strategies for employers. Um, in your experience as an employer, what have you found or what have you understood with the current trends of things that you think that every other employer maybe who haven't, there's one thing there's a pattern that is happening, but it takes somebody who has sat down to really understand, oh, this is a pattern, to really know that okay, there's a pattern happening. So in your experience, what patterns can you see in the current employment trends with employees that you think every employer out there needs to understand about the current pool of talents?
So it's crazy. I think that's one word to describe it. But if we narrow that craziness down, you can talk about the fact that I think COVID has a lot of factors to play, right? Because after COVID, one of the trend is everybody wants to work from home. So even when you put out an on-site rule, people are applying and they are telling you, asking you, is it remote? And you're like, no, but you saw on-site clearly written there. Why are you not asking me if it's remote? So, of course, that's due to COVID. Then another trend that I probably have spotted is that you find out that people are coming in for entry level roles, want you to pay them senior management salary. I mean, you just don't have the skills, an entry level role, and you don't have the skill sets to be able to match that financial remuneration that you're asking for. So that's also another trend that I've spotted. Then one other trend too is that you find out that even the people that are seemingly in line with, or maybe you put out a content writing role, for instance, or a social media manager role, you realize that most of them do not even have that particular skill set, right? And so you see all sorts of people apply, and you're wondering if there's no skill sets in your CV or in your application that warrants you applying for this role, then why did you apply? So it looks like maybe because of the levels of unemployment. So once anybody just see any job role, they don't care to read about suitability. They just apply and try their luck and see if you can pick them. So that's also another trend that I've also gotten to see in terms of employment. So, but those three key trends underscore a lot of things that now happen when you're not discussing with these people and saying, okay, all of the conversations that you now have with them in relation to, are they fit for the role? Do they have the right expectation from the role, and all of that? Then the popular one, I think I must also not forget to mention this, is that a lot of people now, in quotes now, mental health issues, right, and mental well-being. So loosely translated into what they call work-life balance, right? So a lot of people seem to now be seeking, does this organization have work-life balance, and also. So I think those are like four key things that employers, from my own experience, should look out for. And because they go a whole lot in the conversation or recruitment conversation.
Okay. So in recruitment processes as an employer, and this is also one thing that I know other employers would want to understand, how do you position yourself to capture the interest of potential talent? So this could even start from the job listing process. There's a very popular one which, as a co-employer too, I know it's not really sustainable. It could be the salary, right? Maybe some people just see some kind of salary and wow, it captures them. So, but aside that, how do you capture the interest of the ideal people that you think would suit your system? How do you capture it from the process of job listing? Then how do you also capture it by the time you start interviewing them so that you can see which ones do not really suit your company culture?
So my approach is a little bit different, right? Considering that I'm a small business owner, so I do not have the funds like some big brands or larger organizations to be able to either outsource the recruitment process or bring in HR experts that would help you with that process, right? Bigger brands can spend money to do that, and then all the automation systems and HRO softwares and all that are out there, they can now deploy all of them, right? So, but for me as a small business owner, one of the things I start with is an inside-out approach, and I will explain what I mean by that. So I tend to define our own internal processes first, starting with, what's going to be the culture of this organization that we're building, right? Side by side with that culture, what's going to be the core values that are going to guide our engagement in this organization, right? Then side by side, and I try to draw out, you do this when you are talking about business and you want to do, you have your customer persona, right? So I draw out the recruitment personas for the different roles that we're looking out for to say, okay, what are the non-negotiables that the person that we want for this role need to have, right? So non-negotiables like we want to be able to figure out if they prefer collaboration as against individualistic sort of mindset, right? And depending on the job, some jobs require you to be individualistic in your approach. But for us, the kind of environment that we're building is an environment that is collaborative, right? So we want candidates that can be able to display that sort of attributes. So when I narrow down and when I have that comprehensive sort of guide in terms of both core values and the persona for the role, depending on what that particular role is, then we can now move ahead to say, okay, how do we now translate those core values and that persona into the job requirements that we are also putting out there. And also owing to the trends that we've mentioned earlier, we also try to see how can we be able to also infuse some of those trends that are not capital intensive to deploy, right? So things like, employees can have 1 day off or 2 days off, right, depending on their role. So we can implement that. That's not something that will cost us money. But based on our own internal process, you have to have spent a particular amount of time in the organization so that you understand the work culture, the work ethics, right? If you are grounded in that work ethics, even though you are working from home, it doesn't matter because you know what you'll be judged by and you know what your performance will be measured by, right? And so we now infuse that into the job listing itself, and then we try to be diverse with our pool, right? So there are some of them LinkedIn, my job mark, but then when we craft that requirement that we put out there, it's crafted based off our core values and based off understanding some of these trends that these guys are looking out for. And it also defines how we now implement the roles we're hiring for. We're hiring for a graduate trainee role. We're hiring for an experienced role. So if we're hiring for an experienced role, then we have to also state it specifically there that you need to have XYZ key depending on the particular role. If it's not a experienced role, then it's a graduate training role, then we'll take it upon ourselves that we're going to train you on how you are going to do this work. And so that also influences the criteria that we put out there. So if it's a graduate training, we'll spell it up front and say, you're going to be trained on how to do this. If it's an experienced role, we're going to let you know that you need to have XYZ key. You need to have XYZ key.
Next thing we're going to talk about is how you create an inclusive and positive interview environment. The focus of this video is we talking about how employers can find the right fit. So how do you create that positive and inclusive environment where when these candidates come in for interview, they feel relaxed, they feel settled, and then they can perform? Because you also know that if they can't feel settled, if they are uneasy, they won't show you their qualities and you might judge them that they are not fit. Meanwhile, they were fit, but they were not comfortable. So how do you create inclusive and positive environment during interviews?
So I have non-conventional ways of doing that, right? So traditionally, HR people would want to make you tense and see if you can work under pressure and test all those other kind of things. And it's not bad, right? But again, it goes back to what we talked about, the kind of culture you want to create for the organization. And so for me, what I do is I had an interview when we finished the interview and the lady was asking me like, is that all? I was like, yeah, we're done. And I guess she was surprised because she felt like there were no hard-hitting questions. There were no questions that will make her nervous, right? So for me, I believe that interviews are conversations, right? One, you're having a conversation with a candidate to see if they have the skill set to be able to work in the organization and they have the right core values that match those of the organization. And a conversation in the sense that the candidate is also trying to understand, is it the kind of organization that I want to work in? Do they have values that match the value that I want to work in? Outside pay now, right? Because pay, you can always get pay anywhere, right? And there are even organizations that will pay you, but when you get into the organization, you're asking, this is not what I bargained for, right? So because I know it's a conversation, that sets all of the tone on how I create that. And part of that just go into the kind of questions I ask. And so because of our core values and some of the things, the personnel that we're looking at for, most times I'm not asking you, especially if it's like a graduate trainee role, I'm not focused on skill set that you have, right? So I'm focused on, okay, what are your experiences? What have they been like? I just let you talk about your own experience. Okay, where you were in this place that you listed in your CV, or what did you do? What was the work like? Or they just begin to tell me about the work. And I find out that in such situations, they are more relaxed because they are talking about what they've done, right? And then, sometimes I even just ask them about, how was it like living in maybe the school in Port Harcourt? I say, how was it like living in Port Harcourt? They recount their experience. Do you like Port Harcourt? as compared to your own state, maybe Ogun State. Now they begin to tell me all of those things. But most of those questions are also, in a way, crafted with our core values in mind, right? So in asking those questions, I'm also looking out for, oh, are they respectful? Are they collaborative? Do they have integrity? Are they ambitious? Do they like excellence? Do they value? Can they give value, right? So when they answer all of those things, and then sometimes I mix into that scenario-based question that, when we were in school, how were your lecturers like? So it's just general things that they've experienced, right? But the goal of the question is to be able to ascertain if they have the core values that match what our organization has set out for. Or like, have you had a fight with any of your students in school? Or did you have leadership roles? Say no. Okay, why didn't you have leadership role? To say, man, I didn't want the problem that comes with leadership in school and all of that. So from them just discussing about those experiences that they've already had, we can now begin to extract the things we need based on the persona and the core values that we've already set out initially.
Okay, that's exciting. So are there particular questions you use to start your interview, or your interview can start from anywhere?
Yeah, it can start from anywhere. So again, I don't like going with the traditional questions for interview, because when somebody is preparing for interview, they go online, they read all those traditional questions, tell me about yourself, right? And they're already prepared for all of that, right? So the interview can literally start from anywhere, but we're just guided by the principles of, what we're looking for in this candidate is, do they match our core values? Do they match the persona that we've drafted? So I'll give you another twist. If we're employing for a skilled role, for instance, I'll go more technical. Let's say, we want a skilled writer. I'll say, okay, do you have contents that are ranking? Maybe they're an SEO content writer, and they say, I'm skilled, I have 2 years, 3 years experience. So I might start with technical. Do you have contents that are ranking? If they say no, then that means that they don't have this key, right? In some sense, or either they don't have this key, or they've not worked in an organization that gave them that platform to be able to express that key. So I now revert back to, okay, just talk to me about your SEO content writing process. What do you think gets content to rank? Then I just hear their experience to see, if maybe it's the fault of the organization where they work that just did not give them the right platform to be able to push out that key. If I figure out that, it's not the fault of the organization, they just did not have this key, then we revert back to just the basics of just getting their experience. So it can literally start from anywhere. I can just look at the CV, I just want to talk about, maybe I just see that their state of origin is Delta State. I'm like, okay, tell me about your governor, his policies, what are they like? Okay, what do you think about his policy in relation to education? And then they start talking. Now, they didn't prepare for that, right? And that makes you to get the honest answer, right? Those that will take some time to think about their response, you also gauge. So some of those things, you also gauge, and this guy is also quick thinking, intelligence now, right? And they quick on their feet to be able to adapt to scenarios and situations when they occur, right? And then they talk about their experience, and I say, okay, if you're a governor, what would you have done? Then narrow it down. If probably you are the owner of this organization, you want to employ for this role, what will you do, right? So I'm putting them in more scenario-based situations so that I get the honest response from them, rather than maybe some of the conventional, or maybe tell me about yourself and all of that.
Okay. I get that. That's also fantastic. So there's another thing. Are you the kind of employer? Are you the one interview kind of employer? Are you the one stage interview kind of employer, or 2-stage interview kind of employer, or 3-stage interview kind of employer? And if you're a one interview stage, why? If you're a 2 stages, why do you perform 2 stages? So because there will be people too who are new in this process, they want to know Why do some employers even go up to 3 stages and all?
Yeah. So I will share conventional wisdom, then I'll also talk about what I've adapted. Now, the focus here is that I'm just a small business owner, right? In quotes, right? So I cannot set up a very complex recruitment process at this beginning, right? Because at that early stage, what you're looking for is that you're looking for people who just have the right mix of skills to be able to help you build, right? So that influences how the stages come up. So depending on what happens, if I need to have a second conversation with the person, I can have the second conversation. But most times, the people that can work with me, from the first conversation we have, I already know that, oh, these ones can work with me. Then if there are things I just need to confirm later on, I'll confirm them. But maybe as we grow, because I've also looked at, oh, what larger organizations and larger brands do in terms of recruitment. Some of them, the recruitment process can take up to 3 months, 6 months, right? Because for them at that stage, most often they are employing for experienced roles, right? And even when they are employing for maybe their graduate management training programs, there are a lot of things that they want. They want you to have some of the basics that will help you hit the ground running from day one, right? And so that's why they stretch it into different 6 stages. Or one, you have to start doing what we call moving goats and yam and lion, right? Doing all those qualitative and quantitative things to test reasoning and all of those things. Then you now get to doing word problems to test language skills, doing math problems to test intelligence and all those other kind of things. But as a small business owner now, if I'm implementing all of those things, we'll just not find anybody to work with. And at the end of the day, whoever we even find, we do not have the capacity in terms of funds to not be able to pay them because, oh, that person would match a certain quality and they expect a certain quality of remuneration as well. And so, but for me, now I rely more on gut feeling. So gut feeling from the first conversation, so I already know, yeah, we can work with this person. Then if there are follow-up questions that, or maybe there are certain areas that weren't clear, can ask do another interview to just clarify those areas. Let's say maybe during the interview, we skipped things like, oh, maybe are they through NYC or they didn't do NYC. We can have follow-up conversations.
In interviews, you've mentioned some things about conventional interview questions and all that. So the next question I was going to ask is towards that interview questions. And now, since you've already said you're not the conventional interview question kind of person, I still want to hear your take. What do you think about behavioral questions and all the open? You seem like you use more of open-ended questions where you just get the person to put that behavioral interview questions, and you've also explained why. So those conventional questions for people who prefer to use them, what advice will you give or what will be your take on so that they use it and they do not use it to block off important talents that could join them? So, because sometimes those behavioral questions have their own limitations because you're trying to, yeah, uh, the people might just feel like, am I getting it wrong? And most times those questions, there's really no right or wrong answer. So, but then you scare them off and they become uncomfortable. I failed the first question, I failed the second question. So, what would you have to say to people who use those kind of conventional questions so that they do not get it wrong?
Yeah. So I think at this stage, I also maybe clearly state that it's not that I don't use them, right? So in the mix, I still put them. But then again, it's still largely depending on the role, right? Because if you're hiring for a skilled role, you named a lot of those conventional questions to be able to drive out, oh, okay, what does this person know in terms of their skill, right? So that you can know what are gap deficiencies that the organization will need to take care of and all of that. And so I'm not saying outrightly that they are wrong and they are not to be used, right? But for people who use them as well, part of what I will also advise is also focus on, oh, what's the role that we're bringing in this person for, right? Mostly for entry level roles. For me, entry level roles, the person don't have the requisite skill, except maybe while they were in school, they were building themselves in that light. But if they are doing that, for such people, they will often not want to go for maybe an entry level role because they have the hard skill. And the only thing that you are just distinguishing them to the entry level is because maybe when they graduated, right? But then you can see that they have substance to their skill.
Yes.
So, but if you want to use those questions as well, the goal that you want to achieve with that question should be clearly defined, right? Now, oh, if I'm asking this person, tell me about yourself, these are XYZ things that I want to get from the person in terms of understanding this person. If I'm asking this question related to their skill, this is what I want to be able to find out, right? So with that way, it takes away a lot of the ambiguity, right? And then you also need to also understand the right balance of behavioral question, even when you ask a conventional question, to follow up with a behavioral question to be able to actually get the right context, right? Because context is everything. So that you don't bring in somebody that, or you don't face somebody that, oh, the person just, what they just lack is maybe personality sort of disorder or trait where they cannot fully express themselves, right? And so when you give them only conventional questions, they will fail in that light. But when you have a balance of conventional question and then you follow up with some of those behavioral questions so they can just express themselves and express their experiences, I think you get the best of both worlds.
Okay. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much. So where do you think we're coming to the close of this session? Where do you think, where do you perceive with everything happening? We talked about the new trend of things and how COVID brought in new understanding or new feeling or new interest of how people want to work. Where do you feel employment circle or employment system is going in the next 10 years? How do you, it might not be correct, but based on what you see, what are your perceptions about workplace and employment and interviews in general also? What are your perspectives?
Okay, so I'll share certain global statistics to also help us understand this, right? So I came across a statistics that said that office spaces in the US and in most developed nations, for the most part, most of them are empty. And that tells you that, oh, because those societies are advanced, they have the infrastructure that can support remote work. So you can see the trend of remote work is already gaining grounds there, right? But if you bring it back home, we don't yet have the infrastructure that would support, that fully supports remote work, right? And instead, maybe you're earning big working remotely before you can now provide those infrastructure for yourself. And by infrastructure, I mean constant electricity, stable internet, and the likes, right? To now provide those infrastructure for yourself, we will still struggle with migrating fully to remote work. The best we can do for the most part of it is to have a balance of hybrids. But then I also put a caveat because larger organizations can deploy that. I know of some of the top four that they've cut down 50% remote and all of that. They've cut down, and those ones, yeah, again, the pay that they are paying is big. So the staff can be able to bear the cost to be able to set up some of those infrastructure that will support remote work. So for small business owner in the next 10 years, except we have that rapid development in terms of infrastructure, it will likely be the same. And so what you just do is to monitor the development of infrastructure. So if those developments are there, then you also have to bear in mind that, at some point you would have to transition into implementing hybrid systems and all of that. But even now, before we get to 10 years, right, small business owners should consider that as much as possible to find some sort of hybrid mix. Part of it is because it also prepare you and prepare your workforce to be able to now understand when you now want to transition into remote and all of that. So the culture has been built over time. You know how to now manage and track work over time. You know how to put the right performance metrics and performance indices to be able to measure what this person is doing, even though they are not in the office. And for me, that's one of the things that we're largely trying to implement now, even though more of on-site. So we've done both. We've done remote. It didn't work out for because of the things we mentioned earlier. Now we're doing a mix of on-site, largely on-site, then sprinkled with hybrid. But technological development and advancements would fast track all of that. Oh, I know that, they are laying fiber one cables in Lagos and some of the other cities across. And so maybe in the next 3-4 years, you find out that, we have a more stable internet. MTN 5G is there. And then there are just a couple of other brands out there as well, right? So definitely between the next 3-4-5 years, we'll probably have relatively stable internet. And then another good thing is I heard recently in the news, some local governments in Aba now have constant light, right? Courtesy of the independent power project. So maybe other states will begin to think in that light. And before you know, maybe in the next 3-4 years, or that one took 20 years to build, though. Okay, maybe in 20 years' time, we'll have more independent power projects around, and then remote work will become sustainable.
Oh, thank you so much for this session and all you have said. What will be your final take? We're about to end. What will be your final take or advice to small business owners like yourself, especially with the new trends of things, with the whole economy, global recessions here and there, and all that? What would be your final take to them and encouragement as we draw this to a close?
So for me, I'll divide it into maybe 2 or 3 things. One of them is I know small businesses are always afraid of putting structures in place, right? And so you want to start everything, you just hire somebody, the person does not have employment data, nothing. You pay them salary on the 10th of the other month. And things just happen anyhow, right? And so, but my first advice would be first find a way to structure, no matter how small, right? Find a way to have that structure or define things, define what happens and what will not happen. When you define that, it will help you to have people that match what you want, right? And then when people are coming in, they will understand that, okay, this is a place that I want to be. Then from there, they can now grow. And another thing is that as small business owners, you need to be able to also have a career path for your people, right? So if somebody is coming in as an entry level role, are they going to be an entry level role for the next 5 years, 10 years? No. You have to try to define, okay, you're coming in as an entry level. At this point, you progress. At this point, you progress. All right. And then when you imbibe those, the sky is the limit.
All right. Thank you so much for this session. I really appreciate your input and your